Have you ever wanted to cancel an online subscription, only to find it's kind of a pain in the neck? You go to the website, dig through all the stuff, go through their 20 steps, click a bunch of boxes, hear a long sales pitch about changing your plan rather than canceling it, and are just overall greeted with a ton of frustration? Well, whether you slogged through or just gave up, then you, my friend, have been affected by something known as a dark pattern. And sad to say, they're more common than you might think. Thanks so much to Morning Brew for headlining support for this episode. To help shed some light on this dark pattern issue, we've once again called on our lawyer friends Joe Newman and Armin Nersessian at Fenwick & West. Oh, and now's the time you're going to want to pull out your lighter because we're playing all the hits. This video reflects Armin and Joe's personal opinions, does not constitute legal advice, and always consult a real-life, non-animated lawyer if you need help. Now that we've breezed through that legal classic, let's get started. So, what exactly is a dark pattern? The phrase gets thrown around a lot these days as a catch-all term for any kind of dirty trick that fools or manipulates users on the internet into doing something they didn't want to do. One definition we've seen of dark pattern in the game space is any design decision with, quote, the effect intentionally or unintentionally of obscuring, subverting, or impairing a player's autonomy, decision-making, or choice. Okay, but what does that mean in actual practice? Well, let's start with what we know is actionable under existing consumer law prohibiting unfair or deceptive business practices. First, the Federal Trade Commission and state attorneys general have been cracking down on companies that use deceptive tactics to get folks to sign up for recurring payment subscriptions, like hiding material terms, failing to notify users about when they'll be charged, or making it difficult to cancel. Then, we've seen regulators and consumer watchdogs intervene in situations where an app puts too much pressure, specifically on kids. For example, an app called Mall Girl allowed kids as young as 4 years old to care for a virtual pet. But if the players didn't spend real-world money to feed said pet, the app would send various alerts, threatening that animal control was coming to take their virtual pets away. But the good news was, the Children's Advertising Review Unit stepped in and put a stop to that. Also, any shopping cart shenanigans are actionable as well. We're talking here about seeing one price in an advertisement and another higher one in the shopping cart. Or a bait and switch, where the product at checkout is different than the one you saw in the original ad or listing. Or a situation where you seek to purchase a single item only to find several additional add-ons and accessories mysteriously added to your cart. Lastly, misleading users about what they'll receive from a loot box. This one is game-specific, and one of the reasons why most platforms now require loot box sellers to disclose odds. And it's not just misleading text either. For instance, this image from Dragon Quest Monsters Superlight was found to be deceptive, because it made it look like the odds favored getting the more valuable gold maps more often. After complaints, Square Enix revised the image, making sure it more accurately represented the real odds. So, that's what we know. But the FTC is trying to go a step further, seeking to enforce UI and UX design elements that are manipulative and shady, but might not yet be covered under existing precedents. And they're calling these new shady practices dark patterns. Which brings us to the difficult question that crops up all over the law. When does a design choice cross the line into being a dark pattern? Is a dark pattern any design that manipulates a user into taking a certain action? Yeah, this is a tricky one, because in games, designs and mechanics that subtly lead the player to perform specific actions or encourage them to play the game as the developer intended can also be considered, well, good game design. For example, in open-world games like Skyrim or Breath of the Wild, the game's maps and topography include clear sightlines to funnel players towards areas where the most interesting content is. Or like how in BioShock, enemies are designed to deliberately miss their first shot, to warn players they've been spotted and prompt them to get to cover. Or how in XCOM 2, the developers tweaked the random number generator behind the scenes in the player's favor to encourage them to take risks and not get too frustrated by a bunch of missed shots. So yeah, keeping players from getting stuck, helping them avoid getting lost or distracted, and providing hints where appropriate. All things I think it's safe to say most people would want from our games, right? So are these really dark patterns? Well, let's take that XCOM example to one possible extreme. What if a single-player game sensed that you were struggling and automatically made it so every dice roll came out your way? Sure, that could seem player-friendly, but is it actually just manipulating the player into playing longer, or might the player leave because they think it's too easy? And is it a problem that the game is fooling them into thinking they're better at it than they actually are? Or in a non-hypothetical example, what about multiplayer matchmaking that pits you against lower-ranked folks, or even bots, to get you some easy wins when you start, building your confidence before dropping you into the real rank of seasoned players? Is that a dark pattern? And then the question that really bakes my noodle all the time, does any of this matter as long as the player is having fun and not feeling cheated? Things that we as game designers think of as maximizing engagement or increasing replay value could also be seen as impairing player autonomy, decision-making, or choice. And that can be especially troubling in games that make their money from ongoing subscription fees and therefore have every financial incentive to keep you playing as long as possible. So, how do you separate good game design that promotes players' enjoyment of a game or service from manipulative designs that exploit them? Well, that's a super tough question we can't answer in a short episode, but here's 2 things we can do. First, when designing a system that manipulates your players, reflect and ask yourself, why are you implementing that system? If it's not for the player's benefit, or could be misconstrued as such, it could be a dark pattern, and it's probably time to go back to the drawing board. And second, we can list a few practices that we think someday might be seen as dark patterns and drag those little buggers into the light. Those include forcing players to play for unreasonably long times, at odd hours, or penalizing them for missing a day. Burying important legal rights, like those concerning privacy data, under pages and pages of legalese. UI design that emphasizes one choice over another, hides options, or relies on invasive nudge techniques to pester players into spending money or share personal data with no real benefit to the player, and using player personal information to secretly mess with people's shopping experiences. As noted in our Games of Tomorrow episode, travel website Orbitz got in trouble for showing more expensive travel options to Mac users than to people who browsed on PCs. So games that steer certain players to pricier options, or change the prices of items based on a player's known spending tendencies, are likely to be seen as problematic. But what do you all think? Where's the line between good game design and dark patterns? Do you never want your games to hide things from you, or is that sometimes part of the magic? Thanks again to Joe and Armin for their thoughts on this issue, and now it's your turn to sound off in the comments. Don't worry though, we'll leave a light on for you. Wait a minute, have you been here all night? Why would you? Oh, wait, is that coffee? Aw, that's thoughtful. You know what? Why don't we sit down and enjoy some morning brew while we read our morning brew? What's Morning Brew, you ask? Well, it's a free daily newsletter, Monday through Sunday, that gets you caught up on the most important news stories of the day in tech, finance, business, and entertainment. Meaning, you can get caught up to speed every morning via a witty, relevant, and informative summary of the day's important issues. Before I starting my day with Morning Brew, it took me way longer to get my news fix across a bunch of different platforms. But now in about 5 minutes, I'm caught up on a ton of current stories that I'm interested in before I even finish my coffee. For example, the other morning, I got up to speed on Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard, complete with just the best headline, by the way. Learned how major airlines are pushing back on 5G rollout around airports, and I saw the best news. Daniel Radcliffe will be playing Weird Al in an upcoming biopic, which in my head is just chef's kiss perfection. AKA precisely the mix of news I'm very interested in reading. Not to mention Morning Brew is completely free, and it takes less than 15 seconds to subscribe. All you gotta do is click the link in the description below to get Morning Brew in your inbox Monday through Sunday. Then you'll get a newsletter you're psyched to start your mornings with, while also supporting our team at Extra Credits without spending a penny, which, as always, we can't thank you for enough. Well, if it isn't Ahmed Ziad Turk, Alicia Bramble, Casey Muscha, Dominic Valenciana, Joseph Blame, Kyle Murgatroyd, Kyle Wooldridge, and O'Reels1. So awesome to see you, legendary patrons.